Hello, everybody, and welcome to All Blaze No Glory, the podcast. On this podcast, I'm joined by John Anderson of the Scottish Rugby Podcast. I don't think the chat needs much of an introduction, so we'll just get right to it.
So I'm really pleased to welcome to the podcast Scottish Rugby Twitter and Scottish Rugby Podcast legend, I suppose, John Anderson.
I mean, I think there's definitely better words I've been called than legend, but no, that's very kind of you. No, pleasure to be here. Looking forward to this.
The other word I was going to use was darling, but I wasn't sure if you'd prefer legend or not.
That's one I've not been called, but that might stick. We'll see.
I'm glad you came on. I didn't want to do a sort of traditional pre-season how are Edinburgh and Glasgow going to do podcast, because you guys have no doubt covered that fully, and there's no point in rehashing all the great points you'll have, and I'm sure Craig's set up Edinburgh nicely for some kind of glorious failure. But anyway,
do you know what? He's cautious. Bless him. He is cautious. He's not quite as to the wind as I am. he's pretty cautious. So, but no, you're right. I think a lot of places have done their pre-season podcasts and what have you, and it's all the same. And that's the thing. You can't tell anything until the season actually kicks off and you see lots of change in both sides. So it'll be interesting to see how we go.
Yeah. And if I'm being honest, I'll be honest just briefly. I actually think Glasgow are going to win the Shield this year and finish below. And as much as I'm an Edinburgh guy, I've just got this horrible feeling that it's not going to go very well for Edinburgh.
I started pre-season with like that desperate dread of being like, no. And then even maybe about 2 weeks ago, I was still like, no. There was no hope that I had us finishing 10th and all sorts. And then I don't know what Franco Smith has done to me, but he's just been really good in the press, and I'm like, I kind of buy into this. Let's go. So we'll see how we go tonight. Obviously we're recording at the same point as the game's on, so we don't know the score. No spoilers.
No, there won't be any spoilers from me. I'm also recording it as I'm going out. We're going across the road for some pizza with the neighbours. I'm just looking over in case they've ordered it earlier. I don't want them to get in before me, but
that's it. Yeah, well, as long as it's not going cold over there, because some things are more important than rugby. Lots of things. Food is one of them. So.
So first things first. Obviously, you are part of the Scottish Rugby Podcast, which I think was formerly the Scottish Rugby Blog, or still is the Scottish Rugby Blog.
Yeah. So it stemmed out. The blog's been going for I'll be 15 years this year, and originally started just as a bit of a project of love between Rory Baldwin, who's the kind of main creator of it, and it just podcast sort of naturally evolved. I was writing for the blog at the time. Covering Glasgow games and just putting wee fans pieces together and things like that. And the podcast just kind of evolved. We'd always kind of, for about a year and a half, we'd kind of talked about, should we give it a bash? Should we do this? And then Cammy Black, who obviously is the most on it, just we kind of bit the bullet and went for it. And I think I made my debut on episode 2, and we're now on episode 223. So
no, it's going great guns. And actually, the reason I asked you to come on was sort of inspired by the episode I think you had with Scrum of the Earth, where you were let off the loose a little bit, and it was tough. Stuff. So, but we'll get to that in a minute. Just in terms of your own rugby experience, you play a bit. How did you become a fan of rugby, I guess?
Yeah. So I played. I started playing when I was 5. I'm originally from the Isle of Bute, so I was a youth player down there for many, many years. Played a bit in Aberdeen as well when I lived up there. Played a bit again for Bute when I moved back to the west of Scotland. And then had a couple of seasons at Bishopton. They were the last club I was at. And I tried to go back after COVID. I tried to get back into it, and just my legs weren't quite in it anymore. But certainly from playing the sport, I've always really enjoyed watching rugby and playing it. It was an absolute pleasure. But it's been really good as well to be in that other side of the game. And I know, people go into coaching, people go into refereeing and stuff like that. And some of us have got to go into punditry, I suppose. So.
Yeah, and it's great what you guys do, and I like that there's sort of light-hearted bit of it, but you've also covered the more difficult topics in rugby as well, including the episode you had with Nick Johnson was excellent on head knocks. I've actually missed the trans episode about the trans issues in rugby, but I will go back and listen to that one as well. But I think
one way next was the episode I was absolutely I was completely at panic stations before it. I was so nervous. I don't tend to be too nervous about these things. We've done a lot of episodes now, and the format's quite set, and you kind of know where you're going with it. But before that episode, I was absolutely I had notes and notes. I had about 10 pages of notes in front of me, and I was shaking before. I was so nervous because it's such an important topic, and we really, really wanted to do it justice. So, it was a bit nerve-wracking.
Well, you guys do great work. I think I've probably now topped up your pod for most of this. So if anyone hasn't heard of the Scottish Rugby Podcast and you're somehow listening to me, go check them out as well, because it's really good stuff. And it brings me to what I thought we could talk about, because you guys had an episode with the Scrum of the Earth, I think it was. It is the guy from America.
Yeah, David Lawrence. Yep, yeah. He's got a very good podcast out there. It's cracking.
And you guys were talking about the new Scotland jersey, and whether you liked it or not. And it got me thinking about the different jerseys Scotland and the different phases of jersey Scotland have went through. Yep. So that was one thing I wanted to talk to you about. Another recurring theme in the Scottish Rugby podcast is, of course, what happened to the real Flinty.
Indeed.
And I thought maybe we could just talk about a few players that we might think might be surprise, bolters for Scotland or Glasgow or Edinburgh, and a couple of surprising maybe non-factors, like players that have maybe been big factors but might not be that important this year to Scotland. So with that in mind, I'll start off with my theory on what happened to Flinty. It's a bit convoluted. But to be honest with you, because I've heard you guys talking about it on several occasions, my brain has been going about it. So my theory goes back to a similar theme to Royal Rumble 1994. Now, in Royal Rumble 1994, The Undertaker faced Yokozuna in a casket match for the WWF Championship, as it was known then. And my theory is that things were going bad for Edinburgh when Cockrell was there. And I think the only person that's been man enough to face him has been your man, Flinty. And I think what's happened is he's faced him in a casket match that we've not known, an unsanctioned casket match. Cockrell's got some of his old English guys involved, and somehow the real Flinty has lost this match. Now, my belief is that the new Flinty has been brought back, kind of like by the Ted DiBiase character, which I call Mark Dodson in our and paraded about as being the real Flinty. And I think when Scottish rugby gets its PR at the very lowest, the lights are going to go off in the stadium. We're going to hear Cammy with a voice like Paul Bearer going, "Oh yes," and he's going to bring out the real Flinty to confront Mark Dodson and the new Flinty. So it's very convoluted, and it probably isn't true, but that is my.
I wouldn't sell yourself short there. I think that's a fantastic. I think there's no smoke without fire, and I think there's elements of that story that I could definitely see. So I really think you're onto something there, and it would tie in quite nicely with, some of the more kind of Americanization of rugby, dramatically doing things. Maybe that is actually why Dodson invested in Old Glory. Maybe it was to learn. He actually wasn't invested in the rugby, but he was checking out the WWE, like the road show that they have, and just getting some ideas about how best to go with Flinty. So yeah, I think something. That's a cracking theory. Love that.
I don't know how Cammy will react to being the Paul Bearer character in all this.
Oh, he'll be all in on that. He'll be all in on that. He loves a bit of drama, does our Cam. So Cam Bearer, who's now known as. That does presume that he does get out of Flinty rehab at some point, because we're pretty sure that's where he is just now. He's currently working through his Flinty issues.
Brilliant. So moving on, talking about rugby jersey and stuff. You talked about the new jersey.
Yep.
I'm not a fan of the collar, and I was by the cotton ones because I'm a big fella and I sweat, and these ones are a little bit.
They're comfy. They're comfy and they do the job.
But I thought we'd maybe talk about some of the jerseys that you maybe have a particular memory of in Scotland, and for whether it's for good reasons or bad reasons, you bring it up. So just to get us started, the jersey that to me is the most iconic Scotland jersey for me as a fan growing up was the orange cotton Oxford jersey of 1999. And the reason for that was it's the first time I was ever allowed to go to a rugby game by myself was 1999 to see them play the All Blacks.
Yep.
And they lost, as they always do to the All Blacks. But I was in the corner, way up high, when Cammy Murray scored his try against the All Blacks, and the place went mental. But my biggest memory of that game, and I don't know if you went to it or not, was the try wasn't cheered that loudly. But when Cammy Murray managed to tackle John Alomu, the crowd acted like they'd won the World Cup. So that's why I kind of remember that jersey rather fondly, even though we perhaps weren't the most successful team in it.
It's an iconic jersey, isn't it? And it's funny actually because you've picked a topic that's very close to my heart, because I actually collect rugby jerseys. So I've got quite a significant, just in the cupboard just to my left hand side here, I've got a significant number of Scotland jerseys and jerseys from around the world. And those of you, if you tune in live to the podcast, you often see me sporting a nonsense top of some description. So for me, so first of all, the current Scotland jersey, the new one, I totally agree with you. I think the collar is disgusting. I absolutely despise it. I think it ruins what has potential to be a decent top. That said, I think the simplistic nature of the top at the moment, I just find it a bit off-putting. I'm glad there's none of the kind of random pink that got into last year's top. That was a bit strange, but hey ho. But the blue collar is, I mean, it's a statement, isn't it? But it's not very nice. But in terms of tops, I always associate tops not necessarily with like teams or like particular times. I normally associate it with a particular player. So like when I talk about a jersey, like I've got I think it is the away strip. It's a Scotland away strip with the kind of banding on it, and it's got the kind of tartan coloured banding. And I think it's 2014 or 2015, and it's for me it's the Alex Dunbar strip because he was at his prime during it, and watching players at their prime. There's the Duhan Van der Merwe away top, the white one from a couple of seasons ago. That's a personal favourite as well. So yeah, I mean, I think Scotland strips are always a hit or miss, aren't they? And like we've been quite probably since the famous Saltire one, the Stuart Hogg as it is known in my head. The Saltire one with the big blue cross in the front, which was an interesting statement. I think since then we've had a fairly, like, most of our strips have been fairly sensible. I always like our World Cup strips as well. Like, I don't know what it is about a World Cup strip, but we do them good. The one I was watching a highlights package the other night, and it was it was Scotland tries since 2010. And there was a couple from the 2011 World Cup, and that was the blue strip with the gold trim.
Yeah.
And oh, what a strip that was! Gorgeous.
Yeah, that was the one, of course, with the famous last-minute try to beat Romania.
Yes.
Simon Daniele.
All
that. Yeah, a hatchet job on ourselves. That was nice because that kind of weird period with the Canterbury jerseys where they had that white jersey that had the navy jersey, but had all that white sticky stuff on it.
Yeah.
I think that might have been the most rank one in the last 20 years for me.
It was a nightmare as well because like once you washed it, that stuff all just came off, and it just like immediately looked like this desperately poor quality strip. It was dreadful. I think I owned 2 or 3 of those because a retailer that's not necessarily a retailer in favour in the United Kingdom or certainly in Scotland anymore, but the retailer in question might have owned Newcastle Football Club for a wee while. They done a special on them and they were like a £5, so I bought like 3 of them. That'll do it.
That's fair enough. I mean, first and foremost, we need to apologise if Ian Hayes listening. You just referred to Scotland top as a away top. So is it Ian?
That's true. Ian will have words with me on that. That's true. Yeah, I know. Do you know, that's the thing. Like, so, some people are very, very particular about their rugby, aren't they? And I'd quite like winding them up with that. But no, Ian will have words with him. But I'm expecting as soon as this drops for Ian to be shouting abuse at me. So as is his wont. Yeah. But we'll have a grown-up discussion about that.
In terms of the World Cup strips, I think part of it is the fact that the sponsors get taken off them as well.
Yeah.
So the World Cup logo always looks nice on them too. For example, I've got the sky blue one from the last World Cup, which I'd rather forget the World Cup as it were, but I've got the sky blue one.
Yep.
And I would never have bought the sky blue one with the BT logo on it the way it was because it looked terrible, whereas it looks nice without any logo on it. So
yeah, that is a nice strip. I actually quite like the sky blue colour as well. I think in my head, is that the Kyle Stain? Or I don't know, it might be a one further on, that's the Kyle Stain. But you know, you're absolutely right. I think the sponsor logos, and I'm not one of these guys who's going to sit here and be like, oh, corporate sponsorship, bad. We can't, need to go back to not having. We're a professional sport. You need to make money, and the fact that big companies want to slap their logo on your strip, brilliant, right? But it does mean the World Cup strips are special, and it's really nice. It makes them harder to buy, though. That's the other thing. They're much rarer and normally more expensive. So for someone trying to collect strips, it becomes a wee bit of a wee bit of an issue. But yeah, they're some gorgeous World Cup strips.
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly have an issue with sponsors either. I think it was just the BT logo was changed from the sort of colourful one to this circle that looked like someone had made it back in the days of MS-DOS or something. it was just, it would just put me off it completely. Whereas I understand you need a sponsor, which is why I quite like the cotton one of the sort of after Peter Vardy, because the Peter Vardy logo's down here and it's not.
It's just a small, just up in the breast, isn't it? Yeah, it's a bit more subtle, which is always nice. Yeah.
So I suppose, asking out loud, what was your favourite top to out of all the ones you've got, including your non-Scotland ones? Give me a
that's a really good question. I think it does depend. It depends on the time frame, right? But I've got a weird affection for the Stormers, right? And I know it's one of those ones that's really corporate with a big DHL on it, and and the blue and white stripes and all that. I don't know. I just like, so it's what 2014 Stormers top that I've got. I just love it. I just absolutely adore it. Second to that, I've got a Jaguares top, one of their away tops from their Super Rugby. Beautiful top as well. Really like that one. From a Scotland perspective, I don't really have like any. There's no any real Scotland tops that I have like a desperate affection for. I really like the Finn Russell one from the Calcutta Cup. That Calcutta Cup match with the pass. I have a massive affection for that strip. But other than that, Scotland strips tend to be, kind of, aside from the World Cup ones, not really big favourites of mine. Glasgow strips, on the other hand, there's been a few over the years that have kind of really stood out to me, and strangely enough, my favourite Glasgow strip is one of. It's going to sound really bad, but it's one of the only strips I've bought brand new. And even though I didn't actually buy it brand new, it was I was given a gift voucher for my 30th birthday for the exact amount that Glasgow strip would cost. It was like, I see where you're going with this, guys. And it was the Naya Navarro one, where Big Tack was playing for us, had the bridge and the crane down the side and the Centurions, and it was a BT Sport sponsored one. And you know, I just thought it was a really, really tidy strip, and it's one of the ones I still wear to this day. I'll dig that out, wear it quite regularly. So yeah, I mean, just honestly, you could get me pick a different day, and I'll tell you a different strip that I love. But the one that jumped out straight at me was the Stormers one. I love that top so much, but I also love All Blacks tops, and I've got quite a few of those as well. I think it's a figure thing, you know. Wee bit of black. It's quite a slimming colour, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true. I look like a Belisha Beacon with my Lions top on here, but
I went very, very casually into black for this one.
Is it just the All Blacks ones, or normally the Maori one you get? Because the Maori ones vary a lot more.
Yeah, so it's not. I normally stick with the traditional All Blacks ones. I have got a Maori one that I like. It was the Maori one from 2 or 3 seasons ago, which has got the proper big design up the side of it, and I do like that type of strip as well. I'm wearing, for those that are on audio here, I'm wearing a Chiefs top at the moment, and this one doesn't have the kind of Maori designs, but I do love those tops that do. But yeah, I think just a traditional All Blacks top, plain black, no frills, just a white Adidas logo, white All Blacks logo. Jobs are good.
Fair enough. Well, my favourite non-Scotland or Edinburgh one is actually the Romania 2015 World Cup strip.
Oh, good call. Yeah,
yellow one
nice
with like a towery thing in it and all that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the one that I've got doesn't fit me anymore, but I'm determined to keep it. So one day I might fit into it. That's my favorite one out of them all. But moving on to, I think I touched on this maybe in my message to you. You mentioned in that podcast with Scum of the Earth the Edinburgh charity shirts that you used to do that were like
yes,
right, like some kid had put Sunny Delight on a jigsaw puzzle jerseys. And it got me thinking that it's something that Glasgow and Edinburgh don't do. Like, you know, that you've seen the super teams do the Marvel stuff and all this sort of stuff. So if there was a way that Glasgow or Edinburgh could cash in on something like that, having a movie or that into, I don't know if you thought of any, or if I'm kind of putting you on the hop here. I've got a couple.
I mean, you're putting me on the hop, but that's okay. We'll go with that. That's fine. That's sometimes how genius comes. So, I mean, yeah, well, Glasgow's got obviously quite a... You're just thinking about the movies thing, actually. Glasgow's now got quite a culture of movies being shot in the city. And, you know, I mean, there's the Batman was obviously shot partially in Glasgow. You could definitely see a bit of the old... You know, I mean, I don't think Ryan Wilson would be thrilled, but, you know, I think the rest of the team might enjoy it.
Well, I actually came up with my one was a little bit more, I guess, niche, and it didn't relate to Glasgow as a city itself. It was related to the name Warriors, and I thought they could have a sort of a denim jacket on the jersey with a white sleeve, and have the Warriors spray paint on the back above with the numbers, and just
nice, yeah.
Come out before the game, some bottle clinks. Warriors come out to play. It got very elaborate very quickly, as did my story about Flinty earlier on. So,
all the best stories get. You know what? You don't just stop when you think you've gone too far. Just keep going, because there's gold. There's always gold on the end of that. That's Warriors a cracking film. That's got great potential. Yeah. I mean, you can see that the graffiti style numbers. obviously we're talking in rugby now about putting player names in the back of jerseys as well. Like, if that was to happen, oh, there you go. Oh, that has good potential.
Yeah,
That's got serious potential.
Yeah, for Edinburgh, there's a lot less potential. We've all talked about the old Aaron Bruton, but
I mean, that is your away this year.
Yeah. I actually bizarrely quite like that jersey. But for Edinburgh, the only movie I could think of that worked was we get a sort of working man sort of design, and then they come out to Everything Is Awesome from the Lego movie, because I'm sure he has a sort of working guy's design.
Overalls,
yeah. So that's the only thing I could think of for Edinburgh. And the logo is pretty much a Lego piece. So
exactly, yeah. I'm pretty sure I've seen that. I've seen the Edinburgh kit in a Lego shop somewhere. So yeah, that's got potential. Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a career for you in this, and this is why we need to get your podcast. We need to get the SRU listening to these sort of things, because these ideas don't just come out of nowhere. These are genius, and the SRU needs to be listening, because we're on to something here. Charity strips are a thing and should definitely be brought back.
Yeah, I 100% agree, because I think it was quite nice at New Year. I mean, I didn't actually ever buy one, but it was nice seeing them in a different strip, and you'd see people randomly. There's still people randomly turn up to the games in them, but it was quite nice. It brightened up the stadium. It was a bit changed, but
magnificent. Edinburgh. That was the Aberdeen Asset days, wasn't it? And you had just some absolutely magnificent strips. The sight of Phil Godman wearing some absolute monstrosity of a strip, whilst being world class Phil Godman, as he was for those 2 games every year, because Glasgow couldn't get near yous ever. So annoying. We had King Dan Parks running the show. So now that you look back at it, we really were starved, weren't we? It's a wonder. Or it's little wonder we get quite excited when we've got fly halves who can actually run and pass.
Yeah, it is. I won't, in this next bit, talk too much about a certain fly half from Edinburgh, though, because I know that's a sore subject for some people. Yeah, have you any more? Have you got any ideas for Edinburgh, or Edinburgh are pretty stuck on?
I mean, Edinburgh, they are a challenge. They are a challenge, and I think you probably a couple of years ago you had a great marketing opportunity when you with your defend the fort nonsense and all your kind of chainmail and all sorts of things. I mean, there was all sorts of historical stuff you could have done at that point with your chainmail. You could have all dressed up as Joan of Arc. You could have, just went to town with some sort of historical battle thing, running out with claymores if you so desire. I don't know, but yeah, I think your current branding, you've stepped away, and you're now a bit too Iron Brew for me. But we could probably tie you in with some sort of disaster movie. And that's not suggesting that you are a disaster, more just, the volcano. But we'll see how well season 2 goes before we do that tie-in.
Yeah, I hope our games aren't as bad as the 2 pre-season games were, because I was at the London Scottish one, and if it was indeed Ian Wallace, I think it was suggested that pulled the fire.
Turned out the lights.
I salute you, because it was the most exciting bit of the game.
So off the cuff, that part of that podcast where we were like, detectives, let's go, we're going to solve the crime. Idiots, man.
Yeah. I also don't get how you could pull a screamer. I think it's a screamer one, so I don't know how you could pull that by accident. But
that there's some very strong person or /mascot /cry for help that is definitely pulled that, like, to get attention.
Anyway, moving on before we get sued by the SRU.
We'll add it to the pile. It's fine.
In terms of Scotland, Glasgow, or Edinburgh this year, is there any players that you're thinking that maybe have been a bit under the radar before that you think are going to step up and be something for Scotland or indeed just Glasgow or Edinburgh?
Yeah, so I certainly think Glasgow. We'll talk about Glasgow first. Glasgow have got it's a really interesting season with new coach, new philosophy. Kind of a lot of fans like myself not expecting much, and actually we're still all a bit traumatized by the end of the Wilson era. So there's lots of players that we kind of thought were done that have stuck around or have been given another shot. And one guy stands out for me. He is playing tonight, starting tonight. Stafford McDowell has been on the precipice of breaking into Glasgow teams for so long, and he offers just such a point of difference compared to all the other centres we have, in that he's 6'4", 6'5", 18, 19 stone, can kick like a mule. So I really think a player like him, this could be. I mean, I think it really is last chance saloon for him this season. But I think the way he's been talking in the press, I just think a wee bit of confidence in him. He could really be. This could be his breakout season, which we have said a lot. And feel free to come back to me at the end of the season when he gets released and say didn't quite get that one right, John. But I think he could go well. I think other than that, the young guys at Glasgow have all got another season of rugby under their belts. It'll be really interesting to see guys like Ollie Smith, see him get a wee bit more game time as well. I want to see Rufus McLean kick on as well, because he's got absolutely everything that a modern winger needs. Just hasn't stayed clear of injury yet, and that's concerning. So we'll see how that goes. From an Edinburgh perspective, like yous are a year further down the line of that rebuild, and he's done such a good job of it last year, and that the recruitment was so on point. And for me, the only thing yous have done wrong is lost someone like Moyano, who I thought had come on to a really, really good game, but yous have replaced him well. Yous have got talent in. You've got a pipeline of young players coming through as well. I think this could be the year you see someone like Connor Boyle really, really kind of, it will take one injury for Hamish Watson, and you might find that Watson struggles to get back in that team, because I think Connor Boyle's that good. And there's another name across the M8 in that position who may have a say for Scotland. But I think if Mish doesn't hit the ground running this year, you're going to find Connor Boyle get a lot of game time and maybe usurping him in that Edinburgh side. In your backs, you are absolutely privileged to have Buffelli in your team, and like I would, as someone who's seen world-class players at my club and watched them and been like, oh wow, it's a privilege to have you. Enjoy it while it lasts, because the big clubs will be circling. Buffelli will be off probably next season. I would imagine there'll be someone takes him away. But he's just, and it's a weird one, because he's actually like, he's not a traditional winger. He's not really he's not blisteringly quick. He's positionally very strong. Does the basics so well. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of a kind of later career Sean Maitland, with that positional defensive ability. Also, he is able to make a break, but he has the addition of that goal kicking, which is priceless. So, you've got an absolute gem there. So, I mean, that's from the two club sides. Scotland's a whole different beast, and I'm really concerned for Scotland. I don't know where we go next. Almost. The World Cup can't come quickly enough, because I kind of want it to be over and kind of want to get it. And I know that sounds terrible, I know, but I kind of think Townsend, and I've been very vocal about this, I think Townsend's tenure was over, and should have been over. And the reason it's not is we are in a cycle. We can't hire coaches. It's mid-cycle, World Cup, etc., etc. So I think, interestingly for me, the guys coming through for Scotland, having Jamie Ritchie back is priceless. He is gold dust in that park. The challenge is, how do you fit Jamie Ritchie, potentially any of the following: Jamie Ritchie, Hamish Watson, Matt Fagerson, Magnus Bradbury, possibly Jack Dempsey, Rory Darch, like Sam Skinner, etc. We could keep going. How do you fit those guys into a side? It's crazy. So, and then that's before we even start talking about Connor Boyle, Muncaster, other young guys that are coming through. We're really blessed for back rows at the moment, and I think Jamie Ritchie's the pick of them, because he offers something different. But let's see another season of development. But the big players for Scotland this year, this is, for me, this is the last hurrah of that golden generation we had. Finn Russell, Stuart Hogg have to knuckle down, have to do things properly. I wouldn't be surprised if you see them retire after the World Cup from Scotland duty. I think they'll probably be done. And then it'll be interesting because they've been irreplaceable.
Yeah.
So, let's see if we can, because there's players out there that should be able to do a job. But we just need to give them space and time to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I would go into the Townsend point first. I've actually said this for a while. I think we brought Townsend in too soon. I don't think he was mature enough in his coaching career to take on the Scotland role. And I actually think we would have won a Six Nations between when he started and now if we'd kept Vern Cotter. And I know we all bang on about Vern Cotter as would have been the chosen one, but I genuinely believe that because there was more. Yeah, okay, Jim Hamilton was upset because he didn't get picked for the World Cup, but Jim Hamilton shouldn't have been picked for squads for about 3 years prior to that. I don't know how he kept getting in.
Exactly.
He seems like a nice guy, but he was slow, and we've got more dynamic second rows that should have, would have been playing. But I honestly think that Townsend was not mature enough, and he's got this tendency of just randomly picking people out of thin air that we've never heard of. And I get all.
Yeah. Oh, he loves a tombola. A tombola.
So yeah, I think the Townsend thing is I would love him to prove me wrong, win a Six Nations, go and get to the semi-finals of the World Cup. I'd love that, but I don't see it happening. I could see us having a pretty crap Six Nations. I know that somebody suggested that we might win the Six Nations and then go crashing out the World Cup. One of these online poll things that I saw.
It's so very us though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, breakthrough players, I think the Stafford McDowell one's a good shout. I think Cole Forbes is going to kick on. Cole Forbes is going to kick on and get a Scotland cap. And it's Ollie Smith, isn't it? I always get his last name wrong for some reason.
Yeah, Ollie Smith is the other fullback / potentially 13, actually. He's played with 13 as well and looked very good there as well. So, yeah.
I get his last name wrong because it's kind of ordinary and everyone seems to have weird last names these days. But he is he looks a real prospect, and I suppose the next fullback after Hogg does hang them up, I guess, long term. He looks more of a sure fullback than Hogg in a sense that he's much more like your classic fullback, like Mike Brown or something, that he's going to catch the high ball. And I know it's a bit of a trope that Hoggy can't catch a high ball, but he looks more sure, but he maybe doesn't have that kind of X factor that Hoggy has, which might come into his game at some point. So
that's the thing. I think we've been spoiled in some ways because Stuart Hogg was X factor from a very young age, and done incredible things. And almost to me, his game hasn't matured at all. He's kept a lot of the rough edges in his game still exist, and you can see teams work around that. And that's not to say he's not an incredible player. He obviously is, and has his skill set, his positive skill set is incredible. He's his kicking game is phenomenal. It suits the new the new rules around 50-22 and that. Hogg is a great player, but he does have weaknesses. Of course he does. And it's, as you say, if you get a player that can do, we've been so blessed to have players that have been, very, very talented, but having 2-3 world-class players, that's all you need in a team. You actually need the other 12 players to do the basics well and do them every time. And look at the great teams over the years. Look at the All Black sides that have dominated. Yeah, there's flair and there's X factor in there, but the vast majority of it is doing the basics right. And having guys like Ollie Smith, who looks like a level-headed guy, potentially, someone who could be that sort of player that just does his job and does it well. That's what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. For Edinburgh, and I actually think this is someone who could end up being a breakthrough star for Scotland in the autumn or even in the Six Nations is Charlie Savala. I know this sounds absolutely bonkers, but I've watched him and he starts to get more used to because he played league. He came from, I can't remember the name.
Yeah, he's a league convert. That's right.
But as he seems to be getting more comfortable with how you deal with Union when like recycling the ball and things, because he was always looking for mad offloads when he first came. He looked in the 2 pre-season games. As soon as he came on, the whole team seemed to just respond better to what they were doing. And Jaco van der Walt, I have a lot of time for Jaco van der Walt because he's steady, but he's not anything special.
No.
But Charlie Savala looks like he could break into that Scotland squad, and he looks to me, I know this sounds mad, but he looks like a more sure thing than Blair Kinghorn. And I hate to bring up the name Kinghorn.
I mean, it doesn't sound that mad to me, but but it doesn't sound that mad.
I think his goal kicking's more accurate.
Yep.
That is a big thing, because when Blair Kinghorn's playing at 10, who have we got to goal kick that is actually a goal kicker?
Exactly.
We don't have a 9 anymore like Laidlaw that can kick. So even I know that Russell can kick a lot better than most, but we always had a 9 or someone else that could kick. We don't have that in Scotland anymore if Kinghorn starts at 10. So I think Savala could, I don't know if Tooney will do it, but I think Savala could come into the Scotland squad. And if Ross Thompson is not healthy come the time of the Australia game, I think Charlie Savala will be in that Scotland squad along with Blair Kinghorn, because we can't use Finn Russell or anyone from further away because it's not in the international window. So
yeah,
I think he could come in and deal with that.
That'd be really interesting, actually.
Yeah, it's maybe a bonkers idea, and I'll get a lot of hate for it. But
don't worry about that. Just enjoy the mentions. You'll be fine.
The other guy I think could break through for Edinburgh and possibly Scotland, although he's got a lot of people in his way, is Patrick Harrison. He's excellent for the under-20s. But you've got Ashman, Rambo still kicking about. I think Fraser Brown, to me, I don't think he should be in another Scotland squad. He's lost a step. He was a great player. But yeah, I think Patrick Harrison, Ashman, they're the future of our hooker position. And our back row is ridiculous. I don't know how we can't make players that good in other positions. Like, I don't understand it. In terms of surprising non-factors, I'll start off with one because it comes off the back of the Argentina tour. My surprising non-factor for the autumn tests is Chris Harris.
Okay.
I don't think you can replace Mark Bennett after the autumn tests and just say that Harris comes back in. That's my personal opinion. What Tooney thinks is going to be completely different. But I think that the age of Mark Bennett has finally come. And if
you think we're in the second coming of Mark Bennett now? Do you think this is the time?
He's the perfect blend of what everyone loves about Hugh Jones and what everyone loves about Chris Harris, because I've not really seen him fall off of tackles like I've seen Jones fall off of tackles. But I've also seen him run lines that Jones has run. So I kind of think that he's the guy that the second coming of Mark Bennett. I think he should stay in that 13 jersey.
That's a really really interesting idea. And I've got all the love in the world for Mark Bennett. I think he is a phenomenal player. I think he's got a skill set that's underrated. He was often seen, particularly in his early career, he was seen as just a pace merchant. He had that wonderful turn of pace and step to get through, but he's strong as an ox as well. He's not a small guy. He's got a lot about him, and I think his injury problems over the years you often find players adjust their game due to you have ACL injuries. You tend to adjust your game, and you tend to be a different type of player. And I think he Yeah, he retains that ability, as you rightly say. It's more about his tactical lines than maybe that outright pace that he once had. But his defensive work is good and it is really strong. For me, so I agree with you. I think you would struggle to make a case for him other than Harris has got a lot of credit in the bank now, and Townsend really likes him. But I don't think it's a bad thing that you've got Mark Bennett. Hopefully he'll kick on this season, do some great things at club level. Hugh Jones is back at Glasgow. Hopefully we'll see him rediscover some form. He was playing well at Harlequins. Be interesting to see him used at 13 again, or will he be predominantly a 15? Who knows? It's you've got a couple options there. Then you start to go kind of past that. You start seeing, well, Kyle Staines an option at 13. Tuipulotu has been used at 13. We've got depth starting to arise at that position, and that's before we even go into the next level of young players coming through that can play the position. So I think Harris is on a bit of a sugary peg. I still expect him to start the autumn tests with Harris, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bennett was able to kind of grab that jersey off him at some point, because I agree with you. I think Bennett's a great mix of what we want from a 13.
Yeah. So is there anyone that you thought might not be much of a factor, that maybe expect to be a factor this year for club or country?
Yes, I mean so there's a couple of people jumping out at me. First ones, they're both quite controversial, so let's just go for them anyway. Right. So I've already mentioned them. I think Hamish Watson might find himself struggling this year. Off the back of not a great season last year by his own standards, which are blooming lofty. I really hope that he's re-energised. I know it can be really tough after a Lions tour to come back and you're playing consecutive seasons of rugby. I think it was a mistake that he went on the tour to Argentina. Even though he was, able to captain the side and stuff, I still think it was a mistake, because for me, he could have used the rest, but maybe he hadn't played as much rugby as he hoped. It'll be interesting. I think he's under huge pressure at club level, and also because of the makeup of that back row now. Rory Darge has almost made himself like he's in the Jamie Ritchie mould of almost indispensable in that Scotland back row, just because of how good he's been at Glasgow, and then making that transition. You see people make that transition to international rugby. Some people take a few games, some people take 10 caps. Others hit the ground and you go, yep, you are now an international, son. You'll be in every squad for the next 10 years if you decide to be. And he is one of those. But so I think Watson might struggle. The other one who might struggle, other side of the M8, Ali Price might find himself in a bit of bother. And I think he might struggle this season, purely for the reason I think George Horn is going to get a lot more game time under Franco Smith. And I think a fit and firing George Horn could put a lot of pressure on Ali Price. And because of the development structure, because of the way contracts work, and because we've got a couple of up-and-coming nines who will need game time, you might find that Ali Price doesn't get a bench role, that might go to Jamie Dobby, who we need to see get game time and develop. I would be surprised if that was allowed to happen, because I think the brass at Murrayfield might have words with Franco if the starting nine for Scotland is no longer playing regularly for Glasgow. But in the run-up to a World Cup season, he played significant rugby during the Lions tour as well. You might find he just gets a wee rest this season, just plays a few fixtures, does what we all affectionately know as the Alwyn Jones approach of only playing 4 times for your club all year, but playing international. So, but I think from a club level, he might find himself struggling this year.
Yeah, in terms of, it's funny you bring up Ali Price and George Horn, and in terms of Ali Price, I actually thought Ben White's kind of outplayed him recently. And I'm a Velicott lover, because obviously Edinburgh has changed that. But even I can't deny that I think White's got more of the complete package for international rugby than maybe Velikot. And I think George Horn is such a talent, but I wonder sometimes if he's got the full international package because he's more like round the fringes. I don't know if he can like kill a game off. I like him as a sub, and if we're down, I would bring him on, but I'm not sure if we were up, I would bring him on, sort of thing. And Velikot kind of the same. And I do wonder if Ali Price could be in jeopardy from Ben White, if Ben White gets a run of games, if there's a reason why Ali Price isn't playing in one of the autumn tests or something, if Ben White could take that spot off him altogether and become our 9.
Ben White's a very, very good player, and I think the George Horn one's a really interesting one because it's funny in Scotland we always talk about like players play to strategy and play to, they have their natural tendencies, but there is obviously tactics that go around what they do. And I think the issue with George Horn is he's never actually had the opportunity to close out a game or to showcase that. For all I know, he might be a phenomenal game management 9 and able to wind the clock down and do everything you need to do. We've just never had the opportunity to see it because he's never been trusted in that role. And I think there's a lot to be said for players in training, and coaches obviously watch them very, very closely, and they'll know what they're capable of. But nothing replicates that final 5 minutes in a Six Nations match where you're 2 points up and you're camped in your own 10-metre line, and you're having to play slow ball and protect the ball and what have you. Nothing. You can't train for that. That is just, you either can do that or you can't in that moment. And the only way you get better at that is doing that. So it's such a tough one. And I think we've missed a trick with Horn. I think, he's 27 now. Still plenty of time to kick on as a talent, but I think we have missed a trick in not utilising him quite as well as we have, as we could have maybe. But there is other talent out there, and I think it'll be interesting to see how scrum halves kick on.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of 9-10 combo, I always thought that there was a game, I can't remember what game it was, but Adam Hastings was on, and I think he had started because Finn Russell was injured or something. And I'm sure it was Laidlaw. And as much as people got on at Laidlaw for being slow and stuff, I really rated Laidlaw for what he could do for Scotland. But they just didn't click. And then as soon as Horn came on, Hastings' game,
life.
But I think it depends on the 9-10 combo is important. And it's like, I think if in Argentina, if Velikot had been there and played maybe with Kinghorn, people would be saying different things about Kinghorn in that third test and stuff. That's not me being a Kinghorn apologist, because I know all Edinburgh fans are. Some things he done in that game that was so stupid that I couldn't believe it. But I do think that you need to get that combo right. And if you've got Kinghorn playing with Price, I don't necessarily think that's the best combo. I think totally with Velikot to suit the way he plays, which is running lines and basically being a 12 at 10. Don't
ask him to distribute, because that's not his skill set.
No.
Get him running big hard lines through that 10-12 gap and challenging that line and then getting the offload. That's what you want Kinghorn to be doing. And to do that, you need a fast-paced 9 who's going to hit you with accurate ball, and not necessarily, you don't have to be the most technically controlling 9. You just want somebody to lob the ball to you really fast.
Yeah, and that's what's. I mean, actually, I'm surprised they didn't try George Horn with Kinghorn, because
I think Horn and Kinghorn work quite well. Because it's exactly what you're saying. Just pace, challenging the line, lob the ball, boom, boom, boom. So it is all combos, isn't it? And I've given my view on the Kinghorn experiment, and it's not because I don't think he's. Again, I go back to it. It's not because I don't think he's got potential to be a competent 10. I think he is a competent 10. I don't think he's necessarily international caliber 10. But I do think he's a phenomenal fullback. I think he's a great option at fullback. And you saw in the second test when they had to shuffle things about and he went to fullback, that just the level of comfort that he started to show, it changed the game and made it we dominated that second period, because you had him running in space. You had him running with lines, lots of open field in front of him, not having to worry about, oh, well, I need to set up this shape and this shape and this shape and then do this and do this. Give him the ball, let him run. That's what he's good at. And there's a position for that. And it's not 10.
No, exactly. And then it was, I don't know, Townsend seems to get ideas in his head and he fixates on them, and he fixates on when we should substitute someone. Like, I can't remember what game it was, but there was a game where Schumann he had the better of his opposite number, and then they took him off for some reason, and the scrum started going to pot. We were losing in the loose, and you're like, Schumann can play 80 minutes.
Yeah.
Keep him on. Like, you don't have to just substitute him because you're like, oh, it's 60 minutes and that's when my props come off. At 60 minutes, we're going to take off Ashman, who's playing excellent, and put on McInally or whatever.
Yeah.
He gets that's kind of annoys me. He kind of doesn't. I think that's where Townsend really annoys me the most. Is he doesn't feel the game. He just kind of. He's got in his head a preconceived notion what's going to happen, and that's what's going to.
Yeah, he sticks to his plans and doesn't adjust.
Anyway, this half an hour podcast that we were going to do is ran on quite a lot. So, but it's been very good, and you're very easy to chat to as well, which helps significantly.
Thanks very much. That's very kind of you.
I don't know if there's any closing points. I suppose. What are your expectations for the autumn tests and the Six Nations? And lastly, with the Women's World Cup team, and I have to confess, I'm not as up to speed in the women's game as I'd like to be. I know some of the players, and I've been to a couple of the games, and I was disappointed the Spain game was cancelled because I was actually looking forward to seeing them properly for the first time. What's your expectations first and foremost for the autumn test for the men's team, and who should we be looking out for in the World Cup? And how do you think Scotland's chances are in the World Cup for the women?
Yeah, so I mean, from an autumn test perspective, the Scottish men's team are in a really difficult position just now, and I could theoretically see us losing the vast majority of the games between now and the World Cup, and then losing quite a few games in the World Cup too. We've got a tough autumn. We always cry and say we want to play the All Blacks, and we've got that, and they're not in the best position themselves, but they'll still, I really think we might find ourselves losing quite a few games over the autumn. Then into the Six Nations, I just don't see enough from our side to think that we could challenge. I think we've went backwards, and I don't see it changing until we get a change of coaching. And it's not because Townsend's not a capable coach. It's more just I think it's time for a new voice in that leadership group, and a kind of change of just a change of the guard, really. But yeah, I would be concerned. I think we might find ourselves losing quite a few matches over the next wee while, which isn't ideal, obviously. In terms of the women's game, though, very exciting. I think we have to be realistic that we've qualified for World Cup, and this is historic. We're doing this in spite of the way things have been and the way the funding mechanisms have been. And we've obviously, anyone that was listening to us on the Scottish Rugby Podcast has heard us be very vocal about the women's game should be professional. And it's been criminal that it hasn't been. We've been left behind significantly by other nations. And with that in mind, we will go to this World Cup, and I think we will struggle. I think it's great we will have some time before it to see how the guys can kind of come together and build a squad, but it's going to be a challenge because ultimately you're taking part-time players for the most part, try to mould them into an international team that can compete at the highest level with, for example, an English team that's won their 47th game out of 50, 28 games in a row or something. They've now won. That's a juggernaut. The New Zealand team that everyone's writing off is a world-class New Zealand team. that are just being overshadowed by an English team that are better than them. You've got other nations are taking women's rugby seriously, and because of that, Scotland are going to struggle. But it's for me, it's not about what happens at the World Cup. If you can be competitive and you can be proud of the performance, that's what's important. And actually, it's about getting the right coverage of the World Cup so that girls, I've got a young daughter, so that guys like that can just see women's rugby on the television, go, do you know what? I didn't know women could play rugby, or I didn't know women's rugby existed, or I want to go and do that. That looks really interesting. Let's go and give that a bash. Having those facilities to then take that from watching it on TV at a World Cup and being able to then go to your local club and go and play women's rugby. So important. Gets to the absolute heart of rugby and inclusivity and what we should be trying to do with women's rugby. So I think there's a real opportunity for us, but we're just on the precipice of this being hopefully this could be the crucial point in the history of women's rugby for Scottish rugby, and we're going to have to. I think we've got a wee bit of pain ahead of you still, but I really hope the players enjoy the experience first and foremost. That's really what you need to be seeing. In terms of players to look out for, if you're watching it for the first time, Rhoda Lloyd's on the wing, absolute pace merchant. I've never, you've got Rhoda Lloyd, you've got Chloe Rowley as well. They're both really, really incredible runners with the ball. In terms of balanced runners as well, just the actual ability, there's nothing quite like seeing someone at full speed who is then able to change direction with ease, and those are two players that can do that. And in the forwards, you've got well-known names to anybody that's kind of been around Scottish rugby. Jade Conco, Rachel Malcolm is the captain for the team as well. So there's lots to look out for, and a big shout out for is Emma Wassell as well. She's a firm favourite of the podcast guys. I'm just consistency at lock personified. So keep your eyes out for them. But yeah, fingers crossed. There's a lot of talent in that team, and I hope they can compete well.
Yeah, and I wish them all the best. And I hope there's some way I can watch it and kind of keep up with it, because I've still not seen anything advertised.
Yeah, we were kind of struggling yesterday to find where the coverage is at. So I think we'll do a bit of digging on that, and hopefully we'll get some news out on that and make sure that the coverage is there, because it would be absolutely criminal if it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, for anyone that doesn't think that exists for them, then it's putting it in front of them. It's the same thing that happened with I know it's the England team, and Scots, we generally don't support them, but the Lionesses have captured
the Lionesses, yeah.
So it's that sort of thing. But I'm getting frantic texts from what kind of pizza shall I order for Lindsay? I'm getting that from my neighbour. So it's maybe a cue to bring this to an end. But
not a problem.
Thank you so much for your time. It's not every day you get a Scottish Rugby Twitter and podcast darling on.
You're trying to make that stick.
Yeah. I'll wait to see how the other voice react to that. But thank you so much for your time. It's great.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So thanks to John for coming on and adding some colour to the podcast. I'll be back soon with some more sports type chat. It might just be me, a solo one next time, so I apologise in advance. But I hope you're enjoying all this. If you want to get in touch, feel free to check us out on @AllBlazeNoGlory on Twitter, AllBlazeNoGlory on Facebook, and @AllBlazeNoGlory on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening, and you have a great rest of the week.